Today is Tuesday, June the 17th, and I was reminded today of why it's important to have some sort of structure or outline or goal or purpose behind what it is you're doing as a business owner or even as an entrepreneur. And it was brought to my attention because we have this project in Spain that we're really passionate about, my family, my wife in particular, and I. And we've been looking to support them, and they're making plans for the new year, which their new year starts in September because they're a preschool, as a matter of fact. And we were given a copy of their upcoming budget, which showed how much money they were going to have to spend in order to deliver their service to the local community. And there's a huge funding shortfall. And so Lisa and I got talking this morning about what does it mean to steward your resources well. Even if you're a person of faith like I am and you trust in God that He's going to provide the result, I still believe that we play a big role in at least having a sense of direction, a sense of purpose, a sense of what we're supposed to be working towards. And we put our foot forward every day in an attempt to get down that path. But to not have a path, I think, means that we're not stewarding what we have really, really well. And then that brought me to this idea that I have a very good friend of mine who's in a tough spot in his business right now. They have already last year taken all of the steps to really level up their business, and now they're digesting all of the impact that goes along with making a decision like that. And there's been moments when he has said, I don't really know why I'm doing this. I know I've had moments. This last election caused me to really think through, why am I doing this? Why am I a business owner? Why do I go through all this headache? Once you satisfy yourself about some of those questions, I think that there's more of a mathematical answer that can be had as well. And in my history, what I've always looked to do so whether it's this project in Spain that we have, whether it's my friend's business who's digesting all of these major changes that they're going through, or whether it's my own business where we're doubling in revenue right now and we're having to fill a bunch of gaps in as we grow, I think that there is value in understanding as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, what are we actually working towards? And sometimes it's hard to answer that question because many of us start a business or we will start an idea and we will work into the void. And eventually we think to ourselves, at some point it's all going to catch up. At some point it's all going to make sense and it'll be worth it. However, if enough years go by, you will realize that that isn't enough for you and that you need something more to stand on. And so I have always found it helpful when you say to yourself as a business owner, I want to make $1 million or $10 million or $100 million, or I just want to pay my bills. How do you begin having that conversation with yourself? So in this episode, I thought I would just give a quick outline as to how I think about the answer to that question based on years of running businesses, having some businesses not work out, spending years as a management consultant working with other entrepreneurs who have either had businesses work out or not. And these are some of just the simple rules that I put in place. So when an entrepreneur or a business owner says to me, hey, I don't really know what my goal is right now. I'm working into the void. I'm just hoping that this year is better than last year, and there's no real sense of a plan. The very first thing I'll do is I'll say, can I see your balance sheet? So just a quick financial statement lesson. A balance sheet is what do you own, your assets, what do you owe, your liabilities, and then what's over as equity or retained earnings primarily. And then you have a profit and loss statement, which shows what did we make, what did we spend, and what's left over. So oftentimes I'll say the easiest place to start is to build a healthy balance sheet. Make sure that you understand the assets that you have, make sure you understand the liabilities that you have and the equity that you're building in your business. And most times I can zero in on the liabilities and I can say your accounts payable and your accounts receivable, they seem all out of whack. Or you have a lot of long-term debt on assets that are depreciating and you are not necessarily utilizing them well to build up cash or to build retained earnings. So a lot of times you can just start with your balance sheet and you can say, I just want a healthy balance sheet. I want my assets to be 3 times more than my liabilities, or I want my liabilities to be 3 times less than what they are today. But usually you can start at your balance sheet and you can pick off a very easy goal to hit. If you think that your assets and your liabilities kind of line up okay, then the next thing you can do is look at the bottom of your balance sheet, which says retained earnings. And this is, or equity. And this is basically when your business makes money and spends money, whatever is left over finds its way over to the balance sheet as equity. So if your business generates $100,000 a year in revenue and it pays $75,000 a year in expenses and you have $25,000 left over, your retained earnings would be $25,000. Next year, if your business does the same thing and you add another $25,000, your retained earnings would now be $50,000. And the reason for that is because as you make money, you earn money, you spend money, then there's some left over. It ends up finding its way to the balance sheet because what that cash does is it either purchases assets or it pays down liabilities. And so if you think your assets and your liabilities are kind of okay and there isn't really a lot to talk about there, you don't want to pay down debt, you think that you've got all the assets that you need, then the next thing to do is look at your retained earnings and say to yourself, are my retained earnings growing every year by an order of magnitude? Using the Canada example, Canada has grown its retained earnings like 1% a year. So after 10 years, if you only grew your business 10%, I think you'd be very, very frustrated. So you'd want to say to yourself, okay, my retained earnings right now are $750,000 and I'd like them to be $2 million, because if they're $2 million, that means that our business is generating a lot of revenue, it's paying its expenses, but it's very, very profitable. So assets, liabilities, how are we doing there? Retained earnings, how are we doing there? But then that's ultimately going to lead you to a bigger question, which is, okay, once these things are working, then what? So as I step back as a business owner and having sat side beside other business owners, there's a couple of stages that I think you want to move through. The first one is, do I have enough cash to pay our bills? Do I have enough cash to pay me? And then ultimately, can I position myself where once a year I can take a dividend from the business that pays for my cost of living, and I can then go and utilize my time and my expertise to maybe start another business, to go and acquire another business. And so those are kind of the stages you move through. First of all, can we pay our bills? Because as you start a business and as you start growing it, you realize that's actually really hard to do. Building a business that generates revenue is really, really hard. Starting a business that generates revenue and is profitable is really, really hard. So you want to focus on, do we generate enough revenue to pay our bills? Hopefully the answer to that is yes, although 50% of businesses in 3 years say no. Then you say to yourself, okay, do I have enough revenue or enough money left over to pay me? And then lastly, can I position myself where this business is now an investment instead of a job, and I am taking a dividend from it either every 90 days or once a year to cover my cost of living. And then as the owner, that frees me up to go and tackle the next thing. As business owners and as entrepreneurs, we ultimately want to create value. So when you look at your balance sheet, you want to make sure that the retained earnings are very, very strong, that your debt is very, very low compared to your assets, and that's a healthy balance sheet that can continue to support your business as you go. The next thing that you want to do is to be able to say to yourself, how's our cash flow? When we create value, did we create enough value to pay our bills? Great. Did we create enough value to pay me? Great. Did we create enough value where I can now just take a return from the business, and that money that was being paid to me, now I can pay it to a manager or I can pay it to a team so that they can now run this business and I'm freed up to go create value somewhere else. In all of my years, these are some of the quick rules that I've used to try and understand how do you point a business owner or an entrepreneur in a direction, because running a business can be brutal quite a bit of the time. And so after you've gotten tired of working into the void, you need to set some goals up for yourself, and being able to realize a return on your investment, which is fancy investment language, but can my business simply pay me without me working it? I think that's the goal of a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs. The last thing I want to quickly talk about in the context of creating value is when you go to sell your business. The rule I've always used is you take your revenue minus your expenses, and that leaves the money left over, profit. You then multiply that by 2 or 3, and then you subtract from it your net debt. So let's just say your business generated $50,000 in profit a year. 50,000 times 3 equals $150,000. And let's say you owned some equipment that was worth $200,000 and you had a $50,000 loan against it. That means your net assets are 150,000, so $200,000 equipment less $50,000 of a loan or a line of credit means there's 150,000 left. So you take that 150,000, you add it to the 3 times 50,000 that your business generates. That means your business would be worth about $300,000. Now everyone freaks out because they say, "Wow, my business is worth way more than $300,000." That's true. You as a business owner probably believe that because you've poured your blood, sweat, and tears into it. However, in the context of trying to create value, that is a back of the napkin calculation that many people will use. So the only thing you need to know is, why would someone pay 2 to 3 times? Well, for a business that's maybe flat or isn't growing exponentially, someone will come along and say to you, "Look, business owner, Dylan, you can keep running this business and you can take out $50,000 a year for the next couple of years. Or we can buy your business from you and we'll just pay you those 2 to 3 years of profit right now. Because if we took your business, we think we could turn it into $75,000 or $100,000 a year in profit because it works really well with these other things that we're doing." Now, Dylan doesn't have the opportunity to do that because maybe Dylan's business is just 50,000 a year, 50,000 a year, 50,000 a year. In the context of creating value, I've probably reached my max. That's probably the best I can do with this business. So I can keep running it and taking on all the headache and all the stress and all the anxiety and all the risk, I guess, and keep earning $50,000 a year or 55,000 or maybe 60,000. But the truth is, it might be in my best interest to take a business that I can't grow exponentially anymore and sell it to someone who thinks that they can. So taking 3 years worth of profit right now is probably a pretty good deal. And then the whole net debt part, where you had, say, $200,000 of assets, you subtract a $50,000 loan and you have $150,000 left. That basically says to someone who's buying it, "Look, I'll pay off your debt, we'll buy your assets from you, but if you've created enough value, hopefully you've paid off your assets, or you've got a little bit of leverage or debt against them, and we'll just write you a check for that." So assets can be equipment, generally not real estate. Real estate tends to follow a bit of a different calculation, but equipment, inventory, those sorts of things. So hopefully you found that a little bit helpful. Again, I was this morning, as we're going through this budget for this not-for-profit in Spain that Lisa and I spend some time helping, it occurred to me, just a reminder, that as business owners and entrepreneurs, we work 80 hours a week so we don't have to work 40, but we also need to make sure, that's a joke, but we also need to make sure that we have our sights set on something. And as a business owner, after you're done working into the void and just hoping everything works out, you're at some point going to have an honest conversation with yourself and say, why am I actually doing this? How much money do I want to make? Why do I want to make that much money? If I had that much money, what would I do with it? And therein lies, I guess, part of the other rub, which is many business owners don't have huge hobbies or other things that they're interested in because their businesses are all consuming. And so if they don't have a family, if they don't have other activities in the community that they're volunteering for or participating in, a lot of times their business is all that they know, and so that's just what they keep doing. However, that will run its course as well. So a lot of times, even if you figure out all the math, the harder question is, what am I going to do with myself once my business can pay its bills, it can pay me, and ultimately it can give me a dividend or a return every year that allows me to go and do something else? What is that something else? What am I going to do? Now, I can't answer that question for you, and maybe in another episode I can walk you through how I think about it at this stage in my life right now. However, I thought it was important to share some thoughts on how important it is to make sure that you do have your eyes set on something. Otherwise, everything that you're doing becomes much, much harder.